seamless flow of the input credit. So just to give an example, say suppose, I mean, it's 100 rupees, goods are being sold and there's a 10 rupees of sale tax. Now in the new regime, the tax would be 18. So he cannot have 100 plus 18. So actually he should reduce his price from 100 to 92 or 90 and then put 18% on that, because he's getting the input tax credit of rupees 10 or 8. So he should reduce the selling price to 92. Of course the competitive mechanism, competition would work on that area, and that is why there is a lot of debate on this, whether such a clause should be put or not. But this is a reality that in the GST regime the invoice shows the final tax, and on the other hand at present, I mean, lot of the subsumed taxes are not shown in the final bill, only the sale tax is shown in the final bill. I hope I have been able to clarify the point to some extent.
Sir, on this anti-profiteering measure, who would be administering it? Means, would it be the competition commission?
That the government is yet to decide. It's only enabling provision. So it could be any authority to be involved.
So I have a question, sir. So after this MMDR in 2015, some elements like this district mineral fund and national mineral exploration fund, they have been added along with the royalty to the mineral value. And when it is being transported, then what are the provisions in the GST law for encompassing those things within the ambit of the GST law? Like the royalty along with the district mineral fund, 30% of royalty plus 10% again that of the national mineral exploration fund. These all constitute a lot of tax burden on the taxpayer finally. So what are the provisions which bring it within the ambit of the present GST law?
Like I said that, I mean, initially the idea is not to increase the incidence of tax on any of the commodities. Rather, because of we will be taking care of the car shading, the tax rates could come down. But after the GST rolls out and we find that there is a good increase in the revenues and there is a higher compliance, obviously the attempt of the government would be to bring down the tax rates and also to reduce the number of slabs.
Is there any measure on the at present in the provisions of GST for this mineral sector?
So that's for the council is empowered to take decision at any stage, so they can take decision at any stage. And of course the pressures on the council would come from the states, from the consumers, from all the stakeholders, so the decision would be taken based on the dynamics that play out in the years to come.
So I have a question on the compensation. So don't you think that this compensation mechanism is pretty much like an eyewash? So because see, today a producer state like Maharashtra is getting something like say 50 paise for every rupee that it contributes to in taxation. Now on the other hand, a consumer state like say UP is getting something like 1.75 paise for every rupee it contributes. Now today you are introducing a destination-based tax system, and who is subsidizing? Who is subsidizing the income that is accruing to these so-called consumer states? The manufacturing states. My fiscal freedom is being taken away in their favor. Now you are basically getting two birds with one shot. You get to spend my money for their benefit, and you don't lose any income because you have already provided that. It's a destination-based tax system. And adding insult to my injury, you're saying that it is a GST council which would decide the rates of compensation again. So basically, you are taking away my money and giving it to them, and graciously and so generously you say that I will give it to you for 5 years, which I have been enjoying for the last 70 years. So don't you think that this is basically like an eyewash?
You see, we are going to the basic concept. Basic concept is where the taxation should be there. I mean, other states can say that we are all consuming, I mean the tax should come to us. And on the other hand, the principle of the VAT or indirect taxation in most of the countries is that the taxation is there at the last point, at the consuming stage. So there is no different. Only thing is that at present it is being at the manufacturing level. So that is why we feel that those states are losing. But if we look at the whole concept that the taxation should be at the consuming state or the end stage, so I mean the states can also argue that you've been taking away our tax for so long. So I don't think that's a very valid argument. So it's just to how you look at taxation, and the international practice is that the taxation is at the last stage. And then you see, I mean all the manufacturing states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, or Gujarat, they are consuming states in themselves. So ultimately, it's very difficult to say that they would be losing. They could as much, the things tend to, I think they will neutralize to a large extent.
And lot from service tax. They will be getting lot from service tax.
Who?
This Maharashtra, Tamil
largest
Nadu,
states.
because basically services are being consumed in manufacturing states, not in this consuming
That
states.
is,
are consumed.
so I mean anyway, so they will not lose that. It's only the manufactured products which move from one state to another, so they would lose something on that.
एक साथ बोलने तो
Thank you very much, sir. I had informed everyone in my introduction that the GST will rile up emotions and will bring out the best of their emotive ability. And I think this session has been a reflection of that. I believe your position as the additional secretary of the GST Council has precipitated such responses. So I would like to thank you for taking so many questions and for calming the nerves of so many people in this session. Now proceeding to our next speaker, Dr. Kavita Rao. Dr. Kavita Rao will be addressing us on whether this amendment, the 101st amendment, whether this is a boon or a bane. Dr. Rao is a professor at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. She is a PhD scholar from the Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta. Her research areas have included design and implementation of the goods and service tax, the value-added tax, and she has written extensively on various tax reforms as well. Ma'am is a member of various government-sponsored committees and groups, such as the members, such as the study group of the Special Economic Zones and the Directorate General of Export Promotion of the Government of India. Ma'am, we are very happy to have you, and without any further ado, I would like to invite you.
So we are going to go.
To talk about whether the Constitution Amendment, I'm trying to read it slightly widely, the introduction of GST, whether this is sort of good for the states or bad for the states, how do I view it? Before I take off into the presentation I have tried to put together, which obviously covers a lot of ground that others have already covered. What I try to do is to try to answer the question that one of your colleagues at the back has repeatedly been trying to raise, which is GST's impact on producing states and consuming states. So the question to ask ourselves in order to get an answer to that particular question is, why do we collect taxes? Constitutional empowerment and all apart, why exactly do we collect taxes? We collect taxes in order to provide some public goods or services for which we could not levy a price and get people to pay. So if I could sell a pen for a price, I don't need a tax. I need a tax to provide goods and services for which people are not willing to reveal their preferences. So I need something which is not in the nature of a price. That is the first point. So who should you be charging for the services that people get? Obviously, you should be charging the people who are benefiting from the services. So that is the first point of entry for taxes. So when we agree on these 2 points, the next result is that if I'm collecting taxes in a particular state, then the incidence of tax should also be on people who live in that state. So if Maharashtra is collecting taxes, the taxes should be paid by people of Maharashtra. If I am building roads in Maharashtra, then the revenues for that should come from the taxes that people in Maharashtra pay. If I want people in Bihar to pay for roads in Maharashtra, there's something slightly wonky about this tax system, because we will always want more services since we are not paying for it. So there is need to have a relation between services provided and taxes paid. And that is the justification for saying we should have destination-based taxes and not origin-based taxes. So that having been said, what is the situation of Maharashtra? All the states which collected CST or which abrogated the right to retain taxes on branch transfers did so by a central law, not by their own laws. So center is well within its rights to rewrite that law. That law, when the constitution was first written, was not there. That provision was not there. It was introduced subsequently as a mechanism to monitor interstate trade. And then it started becoming a source of revenue. So I gave you a source of revenue doesn't mean I need to give it to you forever. So that is one point. And if you ask a person in Bihar, you should be able to answer him why he should pay taxes so that Maharashtra gets better roads and as a result better industry. So that is the question you need to ask. So the justification comes from the fact that taxes are paid to provide public services. That's a limited point to keep in mind. Okay. So the goods and services tax and its impact on the economy, as the additional secretary just told us, the objective is to create a homogeneous tax regime across the country, which seems attractive to pretty much a large segment of the economy. People seem to perceive that it's a very nice idea to have something which is uniform across the whole country, so we don't have to worry about interstate variations and differences. And so, as economists will argue that people spend less time on arbitrage. Difficult to see? I didn't realize that. Let me increase the font size and see if that helps. Can you make it full screen, please? I will try if I can figure out the technology. No, I am trying to increase the font size, but. Approximately is to create a homogeneous tax regime, the idea being that as economists will argue that people spend less time trying to do arbitrage against variations in rates and focus upon the core activity. So it constructs a stable tax regime in a sense. So what are the two concerns that states might have with respect to this reform? The first is, will revenues of states be adversely affected? And the second is, will autonomy of states be adversely affected? Related issues, but slightly different all the same. So when we are talking about revenues of states, what exactly do we mean? This makes it even worse perhaps, I'm sorry. The structure of the economy is different in different states. So the sources of revenue for different states are different. I'll give you an example. Maharashtra, for instance, at one end of the spectrum will get a lot of revenue from manufacturing activity and from CST on sale of goods across states. You take the other extreme, you will have a state like Jharkhand which gets a lot of revenue from interstate sale of minerals. Both of them get CST revenue. One gets it from manufacturing, the other gets it from interstate sale of minerals. There can be other states where the major sources of revenue are related to, let's say, consumption of certain kinds of commodities. So why is this important? When you have a large manufacturing sector in the economy, it is almost expected that you will have a concomitant services sector as well, because services and manufacturing today are not completely unrelated to each other, they are interlinked. And given that in our economy manufacturing has been taxed higher than services for a very long time, it has this impact of creating specialization where what would hitherto be called manufacturing gets broken out, parts of it get broken out and called services to avail of differential taxes. Now when we go from here to GST, the impact on states therefore will also be different. So what does GST do? It gets rid of central sales tax. which is source of revenue for states. Because of the existence of central sales tax, a number of states were disallowing input tax credit on a related transaction which is called a consignment transfer. So if you had branches in different states, you were allowed to shift goods from one location to another without paying central sales tax under the present dispensation, and the state government would deny you input tax credit beyond a certain limit on consignment transfers. So these are two sources of revenue they had now, which they won't have in the new regime. The third difference where states were collecting revenues for entry tax and for octroys, partly to be given to local bodies, partly to be subsumed within state governments as protection against interstate trade. All of these sources of revenue disappear. So this is the two heads on which revenues go down, and the head on which revenue potentially goes up is services. So states now get the right to tax services, and so they should be getting more revenue from that head, and they'll get less revenue from this head. The question is, will these match out for all states? If the dimensions of these two changes don't match out, then those states will have either a bounty, a gain, or a loss. So Maharashtra, being a developed state with a large services sector, can perhaps actually even gain going forward, and Jharkhand, being a backward state and not having a large enough services sector, or Chhattisgarh or Orissa, can potentially be on the back foot because the revenue loss can be larger than the revenue gain. So how I am positioning it now is not developed states lose and developing states, less developed states gain, not that producers lose and consumers gain, but that certain composition of the economy will create gain or loss. And that is something you might want to keep in mind as an alternative way of looking at gains and losses. The second element that is important to ask here, a slight additional qualification, is whenever we say manufacturing states lose, it does not automatically translate into consuming states gain. Why doesn't it translate into that? For the simple reason that consuming states were already collecting taxes on their consumed base. All goods sold in my state, I was collecting a tax. So on my consumption, I am collecting a tax. Only to the limited extent that somebody brings in branch transfer and doesn't pay tax on it, I don't get a tax. But on all other consumption in my state, I am paying a tax. And for the consumption state, since the base is lower, state VATs were levied on a base inclusive of excise duty. Whereas GST will be levied on a base excluding central GST. So the states can even argue that I lose out because my base is a shade smaller than what it would be under the present regime. So that difference about consuming states gaining and producing states losing perhaps is a bit of a misnomer, which is what I thought I'd flag for your consideration. The third issue, before we go to compensation of losses, the third issue that NSAC discussion needs to take into account, and I'll talk about third and fourth, and we'll stop at that. The third issue is, we just heard that if there is an 18% tax, we expect it to be divided 50-50 among the states and the union government. If you look at the present decomposition of revenues, states have been getting slightly larger than what the center has been getting. So the share of states is more like 56% and center is 45% in total revenue kitty. Now if you are going to divide the new pool 50-50, it is not clear how it affects the revenue profile. Another issue of concern, there are commodities which only the states were taxing at the moment. Agricultural commodities, for instance. Most of them were taxed at 4%, let's say. Now you increase the rate to 5%, but you divide it into 2.5 to states and 2.5 to center. How this affects the revenue profile, once again, is not known. So there are some uncertainties in how the dispensation will resolve itself into revenue collections. In terms of the design, there is another aspect that I would like to flag a few concerns before we talk about revenue compensation. There are two concerns basically. The first relates to the non-inclusion of electricity duty. While we talk about GST as a reform, which is trying to reduce cascading in the economy, and once again another qualifier, cascading is not just tax on top of tax, which tends to be small and I would ignore it. The bigger element of cascading is when one part of your value of a product gets taxed multiple times. So if suppose iron ore is taxed and then nails or chassis of a car gets taxed and then a car gets taxed again, then iron ore is taxed once as iron ore, then it gets taxed as a chassis, then it gets taxed as a car again. So one part of value added gets taxed 3 times. That is the big part of cascading. The big part of cascading is not 1%, 10% of 10%. That would be relatively small. The big part of cascading is when one part of value added gets taxed repeatedly because it was the initial core input which gets used. Now, while we are trying to reduce cascading in the economy, unfortunately for some reason, the design of GST does not want to bring in electricity duty within the ambit of GST. What this means is that any input that electricity production uses bears GST. On top of that, we will have an electricity duty, and both of these will not be set off. And unfortunately, electricity happens to be an input that's used across the entire economy. So if you're looking at cascading, then perhaps that is a bigger concern than petroleum products. And the reason why I say that is while petroleum products are an input to the whole economy, petroleum products have this special feature of being considered a polluting fuel. And so most governments have tended to tax petroleum products high even when they are in GST. So even if you brought petroleum into GST, you will still have a GST and dissuading excise duty of some kind, and so the rates of tax would not be much lower and the impact would not be that dramatic. So those are the two issues so far as the design of GST is concerned. Okay, coming to the compensation of revenue loss. Therefore, since there are a lot of uncertainties, since state governments are bothered by whether they will lose or gain from this whole process of reform, as the champion of the reform process, and every reform management experts will tell you needs a champion, otherwise it doesn't happen. So as the leader in this process of reform, central government gives a commitment that it will compensate for all losses. And we heard about the formula, so we won't need to talk about the formula per se. There was a question raised on whether having a uniform rate of 14% across the entire nation is appropriate. And Ashwin Dasgupta mentioned that since every state has agreed to it, there is no point in rocking the boat, which is very fair. It's also important to remember that with giving the RBI the mandate to restrict inflation to 4%,